The first time my sister tried to throw me out of my own building, she did it while eating cheesecake. I know that's a strange detail to remember, but it's burned into my memory because of how casual she looked. There she was, sitting comfortably at our parents' dining table, scrolling through her phone between bites of dessert while informing me that my rent was about to increase by nearly 300%. As if she were discussing the weather, as if she had every right in the world to decide whether I could afford to stay in my apartment. When I asked if she was serious, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. "Oh, I'm completely serious." My parents nodded along. Not one of them questioned her authority. Not one of them asked why she thought she could make decisions about where I lived. And the most unbelievable part, none of them knew I had secretly owned the entire building for years. My name is Amelia, and if you asked my family to describe me, they'd probably call me the quiet one, the dependable one, the daughter who never caused problems, the one who handled everything herself. Growing up, I learned very early that attention in our house was reserved for my older sister, Vanessa. She was louder, more confident, and somehow always managed to become the center of every situation. While she demanded attention, I earned good grades, worked hard, stayed out of trouble, and quietly built my own life. Unfortunately, being low maintenance became my family's excuse to overlook me. Whenever Vanessa forgot responsibilities, my parents rushed to help. When she overspent, someone bailed her out. When she made bad decisions, everyone focused on understanding her feelings. When I succeeded, it was expected. When I struggled, I was told I'd figure it out. And I usually did. Over time, I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped expecting recognition. I simply focused on building a future that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. The one exception was my grandmother. Grandma saw everything. She never announced it, never created drama, but she noticed things. She noticed who showed up when she needed help, who visited when nobody was watching, who remembered birthdays, who called simply to check in. And unlike the rest of my family, she never confused quietness with weakness. When she passed away 6 years ago, the entire family expected her estate to be divided equally. At least that's what everyone assumed. The reading of the will was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life. Vanessa arrived confident. My parents looked relaxed. Everyone expected predictability. Then the attorney began reading. The investment accounts were divided among various relatives. Personal items were assigned. Charitable donations were outlined. Then came the apartment building, Grandma's most valuable asset. The room became completely silent because she had left it entirely to me, not jointly, not partially, entirely. I still remember Vanessa's face. Shock, then disbelief, then anger. My parents spent weeks insisting Grandma must have made a mistake, but there wasn't any mistake. The paperwork was flawless. Grandma knew exactly what she was doing. The building became mine. And that's where I made a decision that would eventually change everything. I didn't announce my ownership publicly. I hired a professional property management company and stepped away. The company handled leases, maintenance, tenant relations, and finances. Most residents never knew who the owner was, including Vanessa. At the time, it felt easier. I wanted peace. I didn't want endless family arguments over money. So I stayed quiet. Years passed. The building performed well. Property values increased. Rental income grew. My career advanced. My savings expanded. Life was stable. Meanwhile, Vanessa continued being Vanessa. She eventually rented one of the units. Through a combination of confidence and family favoritism, she slowly convinced herself she had influence over the property. Not ownership, but influence. Enough to boss people around. Enough to insert herself into conversations she didn't belong in. Enough to believe she held power. Nobody ever challenged her assumptions, which eventually led to the cheesecake incident. That afternoon, she slid a new rental agreement across the table. The proposed rent was absurd, nearly triple my existing rate. I stared at it, then looked at her. She smiled. "You've been getting a good deal for years." My father nodded. Honestly, she's right. My mother added, everyone has to pay market rates eventually. I sat there listening while three people discussed my housing situation as though I were a child being disciplined. Vanessa even launched into a lecture about financial responsibility. Financial responsibility. The woman who still called our parents whenever she overdrew her account. The irony was almost overwhelming. But something interesting happened. I didn't get angry. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I felt something else. Clarity. For years, I'd believed that if I worked hard enough, succeeded enough, or sacrificed enough, my family might eventually treat me differently. Sitting there, listening to them justify humiliating me, I finally understood the truth. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it wasn't accidental. It was a choice. They consistently chose Vanessa, and once I accepted that reality, I stopped feeling hurt. I simply felt done. I folded the rental agreement, placed it inside my purse, stood up, and thanked them for their time. The confusion on their faces was almost amusing. They expected an argument. Instead, I left. The next morning, I contacted the property management company, professionally, calmly. I requested a complete review of tenant records, lease agreements, communication logs, and administrative activity, not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted facts. Facts are incredibly useful when emotions start clouding people's judgment. The audit took several weeks. When the results arrived, they revealed something fascinating. Vanessa had spent years presenting herself as someone connected to ownership. Not officially, not directly, but through implications. She'd advised tenants, inserted herself into discussions, made suggestions about lease matters, even pressured a few residents regarding renewals. Nothing criminal, nothing dramatic, but absolutely inappropriate. The management company immediately issued notices clarifying that Vanessa held no ownership authority whatsoever. Employees were instructed to stop discussing operational matters with her. And just like that, the illusion of influence disappeared. That alone would have been enough. But the audit uncovered something else, something Vanessa never expected. For years, she'd been receiving discounted rent through favors from a junior employee she happened to know personally. Unauthorized discounts, special treatment, exceptions that violated company policy. The employee faced disciplinary action. The discounts ended immediately. And Vanessa suddenly found herself paying full market rent for the first time in her life. 3 days later, my phone looked like it had exploded. Calls, texts, voicemails, family messages, group chats. Vanessa was furious. She demanded explanations, demanded meetings, demanded intervention. I ignored everything. Eventually, my mother called. Unlike Vanessa, she sounded nervous. Amelia, she said carefully. Do you know what's happening with Vanessa's apartment situation? I looked out my office window and smiled slightly. Yes. There was a pause. Then another. Finally, she asked how, and after 6 years, I told her, because I own the building. Silence, complete silence. The kind that only happens when someone's entire understanding of reality suddenly shifts. I explained everything. The inheritance, the management company, the audits, the ownership structure. All of it. When I finished speaking, she barely managed to say goodbye before hanging up. The fallout spread faster than I expected. Vanessa called repeatedly, more than 20 times in a single day. When I finally answered, her tone had completely changed. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the superiority. Now there was only shock. You own the building? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? The question revealed everything, because she genuinely believed I owed her that information, as though my life existed for her convenience. The truth was simple. Nobody asked. Nobody cared enough to ask. For years, my family assumed they already knew exactly who I was. They never considered there might be more beneath the surface. They underestimated me because it was easier than paying attention. Over the following weeks, family dynamics shifted dramatically. Relatives learned the truth. Friends learned the truth. Neighbors learned the truth. Not because I announced it, because Vanessa couldn't stop talking about it. The more she explained what happened, the worse it sounded. She had attempted to financially intimidate the owner of the property she lived in. People started reevaluating other stories she'd told over the years, other conflicts, other complaints, other narratives where she always somehow ended up the victim. For the first time in her life, people questioned her version of events. That hurt her far more than losing the discounts. Meanwhile, my parents suddenly became interested in reconciliation, family dinners, heartfelt conversations, fresh starts. It was remarkable how quickly respect appeared once they realized I possessed something they valued. But by then, I saw things differently. I wasn't angry anymore. I simply understood. And understanding can be more final than anger. A year later, I established a scholarship fund in my grandmother's name using part of the building's annual profits. The fund helps young women secure housing and education when family support isn't available. It felt like the kind of thing grandma would have wanted. She gave me stability. I wanted to pass that gift forward. As for my family, we rarely speak now. There was no explosive confrontation, no dramatic final argument, just distance, healthy, peaceful distance. And honestly, I've never slept better. The building continues to thrive. The scholarship continues to grow. And every now and then, I think back to that afternoon at the dining table. The cheesecake, the smirk, the confidence, the certainty. Vanessa thought she was teaching me a lesson about power. What she actually taught me was something far more valuable. The people who underestimate you are often revealing more about themselves than they are about you. In the end, I didn't ruin my family. I didn't expose them. I didn't seek revenge. I simply stopped protecting them from the consequences of their own choices. And that's when everything finally changed. If you enjoy stories about betrayal, revenge, and justice served cold, subscribe for more daily stories.